What if the most controversial miracle is not about power, but about perspective? What if what looks like a simple act of healing is actually a challenge to the way people see God, rules, and compassion? And what if the question Jesus asks in a quiet room changes everything we assume about mercy? In Luke 14, 1-6, Jesus enters the house of a prominent Pharisee to eat a meal on the Sabbath. On the surface, it is a normal gathering. Religious leaders are present. Social order is intact. Conversations are happening within familiar boundaries of interpretation and tradition. But Jesus is not there only as a guest. He is also there as a revealer of hearts. Luke tells us that they are watching him closely, not casually observing, but intentionally watching. There is expectation, scrutiny, and tension beneath the surface. This is not just hospitality. This is evaluation. And in that moment, a man appears. He is suffering from dropsy, a condition that causes swelling and visible physical distress. In ancient understanding, such conditions were often socially and religiously complicated. People would not only see illness, but also interpret it through layers of cultural and spiritual assumptions. This man does not speak in the passage. He does not ask for healing. He simply stands before Jesus, and everything pauses. The atmosphere in the room shifts, because now a silent question has entered the space without being spoken. What will Jesus do on the Sabbath? This is not an accidental moment. The presence of the man is central to what is about to unfold, and so is the timing. The Sabbath is a day of rest, a day of restraint from work. But the definition of work had become deeply debated and carefully guarded. Healing, in the eyes of many present, would likely fall into a category that raises tension. But Jesus does not react to pressure. He responds with awareness. Before doing anything, he asks a question. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? This is not a question seeking information. It is a question exposing perspective, because everyone in the room already has an answer, even if they are not willing to say it aloud. And their silence becomes part of the story. No one responds, no one argues, no one steps forward. Silence fills the space. And in that silence, Jesus acts. He heals the man. Immediately, the man is restored. His condition is changed. His suffering is removed. There is no delay, no gradual process described, no negotiation, just transformation. Then Jesus speaks again. He asks a second question. If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out? Again, the room is confronted with truth that cannot be easily dismissed. Because now the issue is not theoretical. It is practical. It is about priority. It is about what people naturally do when something they value is in danger. And the implication is clear. Compassion is not suspended by timing when urgency is understood. The passage ends by saying they had nothing to reply. This silence is different from the earlier silence. Before the healing, silence was tension. After the healing and teaching, silence becomes exposure. Because something has been revealed that cannot be easily defended, the man is healed. Jesus is questioned internally. But the deeper focus of the passage is not on conflict. It is on contrast. Contrast between interpretation and compassion, between rules and mercy, between expectation and action. There is something important about the setting of this story. It is a meal on the Sabbath, a place of fellowship, discussion, and religious identity. But within that familiar setting, an uncomfortable truth emerges. Proximity to religious structure does not automatically guarantee alignment with divine heart. The Pharisees are not portrayed as ignorant. They are observant, they are knowledgeable, they are committed to interpretation of law. But Jesus introduces a dimension they are not fully engaging with in that moment: the purpose behind the law itself. The man with dropsy does not represent a theological argument. He represents suffering. And suffering does not wait for perfect timing. One of the central tensions in this passage is not simply about whether healing is allowed on the Sabbath. It is about what the Sabbath is for. Is it a restriction that limits compassion, or is it a space designed to reflect restoration? Jesus does not dismiss the Sabbath. He reframes it, because in his actions, the Sabbath becomes a day where restoration is not delayed, where mercy is not postponed, where human need is not ignored in the name of ritual precision. The question he asks reveals something deeper than law interpretation. It reveals priority alignment. If your child or your ox falls into a well, This comparison is intentional. It connects emotional instinct with moral reasoning. It points to what people already understand in their lived experience. When something valuable is in immediate danger, action is taken. And Jesus is asking why that same principle is not extended to human suffering in front of them. The man does not contribute words in this story, but his presence speaks loudly. He is the reason the question becomes visible. Without him, the discussion remains abstract. With him, it becomes real. And that is often how spiritual understanding is tested. Not in theory, but in encounter. Not in discussion, but in response. The healing itself is not described in detail. There is no elaborate process recorded. The focus is not on how it happens, but that it happens. And it happens before full agreement from the observers. This is significant, because it shows that compassion is not waiting for consensus. The restoration of the man is immediate. His body responds to the word and action of Jesus without delay. But the response of the room is delayed silence. And that contrast is important. One life is restored instantly. One group remains silent in reflection. There is also a deeper layer to the way Jesus operates in this moment. He does not enter the house with confrontation. He enters as a guest. But when a moment of suffering appears, he does not ignore it to preserve social comfort. He prioritizes healing over avoidance. That decision reveals a consistent pattern in his ministry. Human need is never secondary to situational convenience. Even when surrounded by scrutiny, even when under observation, even when timing is debated, the man is not described as arguing for his healing. He is not part of a debate. He is simply present. And sometimes presence alone becomes enough for transformation when it meets divine compassion. After the healing and teaching, the passage ends without recorded rebuttal. The silence of the Pharisees is notable. It is not the silence of agreement, but the silence of unresolved tension. Because something has been demonstrated that cannot be easily refuted without revealing deeper priorities. This story is not just about a healing miracle. It is about how people interpret mercy when it interrupts expectation. It is about how systems respond when compassion does not wait for permission. It is about how silence can either conceal understanding or reveal conviction. And it is about how Jesus consistently places human restoration at the center of his actions. The man with dropsy is not named, his background is not explained, his future is not detailed, but in this moment he is seen, and he is restored. That alone becomes the testimony of the passage. Sometimes transformation does not require long explanation, it requires encounter, and in this encounter mercy does not hesitate. It does not delay, it does not negotiate, it acts. The healing on the Sabbath is not a violation of holiness, it is a revelation of it. Because holiness that ignores suffering becomes incomplete in expression. But holiness that restores life reflects the heart behind the law itself. This passage invites reflection on how easily compassion can be delayed in the name of structure, and how often structure is meant to serve compassion, not restrict it. The final silence in the room is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of reflection. Because once mercy is witnessed, it cannot be unseen. Once healing is experienced, it cannot be unheard. And once Jesus acts, the question shifts from is it allowed to what does this reveal about God's heart? That is where the story leaves us. Not with argument, but with awareness. Not with resolution, but with reflection. And in that reflection, the meaning of the Sabbath begins to expand beyond restriction into restoration. Because where Jesus is present, healing is never out of place. It is revealed as part of purpose. And that is the deeper message hidden within this moment. Restoration is not interruption of holiness. It is expression of it. Thank you for watching this video. If this message spoke to you, take a moment to like, follow this channel, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that compassion is never out of season. Your support helps spread these reflections to more people who may need to see how Jesus values restoration above restriction.